The narrative I'm about to recount is intensely personal, filled with moments I never anticipated encountering. It began with trust, curiosity, and the complexities of human connections. My husband and I have been married for more than 7 years, creating a life together filled with love, laughter, and of course, occasional challenges. However, I never imagined that one of those challenges would manifest as a betrayal cloaked in romance and seduction. It all started a few months ago on one of our regular Friday evenings at home. My husband, whom I'll refer to as David for the sake of this account, had invited a friend over for drinks. His friend Matt had been a consistent presence in our lives. He was there when David and I first met, served as one of the best men at our wedding, and over time, I had grown close to him as well. Matt was charming, humorous, and always seemed to have a way of easing any tension. I had no reason to believe that night would be anything but ordinary. As the evening unfolded, our conversation covered various topics, ranging from work to future plans. Then, unexpectedly, the discussion veered in a surprising direction. David, in what I initially took as a joke, mentioned the idea of exploring new dimensions in our intimate life. He brought up how some couples introduce others into their relationship to bring excitement to their sex lives. I laughed, dismissing it as one of those lighthearted remarks that emerge after a few drinks. But David didn't let the subject drop. He continued, speaking about his deep trust in Matt, their years of friendship, and how he thought it might be exhilarating for us to try something unconventional. I was stunned. Was he genuinely suggesting this? I had never considered being with anyone other than David, let alone involving his closest friend. My thoughts raced, though I resisted overreacting, hoping it was just the alcohol influencing him. Yet, as the conversation progressed, it became evident that David was serious. He reassured me repeatedly, framing it as an idea to explore together, not something to decide hastily. He emphasized trust and boundaries, portraying it as a way to strengthen our connection in a safe, loving environment. Meanwhile, Matt sat silently, offering a subtle smile that made it seem like the topic had been pre-discussed between the two of them. I was torn. I loved and trusted my husband, yet the notion of stepping so far out of my comfort zone was unsettling. David persisted, framing it as an act of unity rather than betrayal. He painted it as an opportunity to deepen our bond and share an unforgettable experience. Despite my reservations, part of me found the idea intriguing. David and Matt seemed to sense my wavering resolve and began describing how the situation could unfold. They painted an idyllic picture, using words that made it seem romantic, magical even. They assured me everything would be slow, sensual, and entirely within my control, promising to stop if I ever felt uncomfortable. They made it all sound so centered on me and my comfort that it started to feel oddly tempting. Before I knew it, David leaned in to kiss me while Matt watched. The moment felt surreal, almost cinematic. I didn't pull away, but I didn't fully reciprocate either, my mind still grappling with the situation. Then Matt moved closer, and the atmosphere in the room shifted. The tension was palpable, and instead of resisting, I allowed myself to be swept up in the moment. It began innocently enough with David and me sharing a kiss, as we always did. But this time, Matt was there, observing. Slowly, David stepped back, gesturing for Matt to come closer. I didn't stop him, though I couldn't entirely understand why. Perhaps I was curious, or maybe I trusted David too deeply. Perhaps I felt I owed it to him to at least try. Matt kissed me gently at first, and a whirlwind of emotions surged. Excitement, guilt, confusion. The evening unfolded in ways I had never imagined possible. As David had promised, everything happened gradually. For a fleeting moment, I let myself get lost in the sensations. Despite an internal voice warning me this was wrong, there was an undeniable thrill that drew me in, leaving me torn between exhilaration and unease. David stayed by my side throughout, offering reassurance, touching me gently, and making it seem as though everything was okay. But as the night went on, the gravity of the situation began to take hold. I wasn't just with my husband, his best friend was there too. While part of me had experienced physical pleasure, another part felt profoundly uneasy. What had I done? Had I crossed an irreversible line? And why had David, the man I trusted above all else, encouraged me to do this? When it was over, we sat in silence. The atmosphere had shifted, and the weight of what had transpired pressed down on me. I couldn't bring myself to meet David's gaze, nor could I look at Matt. Shame, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal washed over me. David had insisted this was about trust, about bringing us closer, but all I felt was an ever-widening chasm between us. In the days that followed, a persistent sense of unease lingered. Something felt deeply wrong. While I had been fully aware of what was happening that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been misled. David had framed it as an act of love and trust, but deep down, I recognized it for what it was: selfish, manipulative, and completely at odds with the relationship I thought we shared. I found myself pulling away from David, replaying the events of that night in my mind over and over. How had I allowed myself to get swept up in something so reckless? More importantly, how had David persuaded me to believe it was a good idea? I felt betrayed, not only by him but also by myself, for going along with it. It wasn't long before I confronted him. I told David exactly how I felt and how wrong everything seemed in hindsight. I explained that instead of feeling closer to him, I felt further apart than ever before. He tried to soothe me, insisting it was a one-time occurrence that wouldn't alter our relationship. But the damage had already been done. Something fundamental between us had shifted, and it wasn't something that could be repaired. Over time, I realized the night had never been about strengthening our bond. It had been about David's fantasy, his desire to push boundaries that I wasn't comfortable with. That he had involved Matt, someone I had trusted, only made it worse. It was a betrayal on so many levels. As the days turned into weeks, the distance between David and me grew insurmountable. I couldn't look at him without being reminded of that night, and I no longer trusted him as I once did. Eventually, we made the difficult decision to part ways. It wasn't easy, but I knew I couldn't stay in a relationship where the trust had been so profoundly broken. Looking back, I realized I should have trusted my instincts. I should have stood firm in what I felt was right instead of letting David convince me otherwise. That night taught me valuable lessons about boundaries, trust, and the importance of standing up for myself, even when pressured by someone I love. In the end, it was a painful but necessary lesson. Trust, once shattered, is incredibly hard to rebuild, and sometimes the people we think we know best can surprise us in the most hurtful ways.